5:30 in the evening. It looks like there's a bit of a light show. Not much of one, but a nice enough looking sky. It's clear enough, and the light is making for a good visual. There seems to be some activity going on. And maybe that was it. That squirrel. That squirrel loves to hang out in this general area. But there's also sounds of activity going on further down the hill. I'm curious what it is. It sounds kind of organized. As the squirrel makes his way down the hill again. You can probably hear him. It's amazing the amount of sound that little creatures can generate. You would think all the sound is created by a bigger animal, but in this case it's not. It's either turkeys or squirrels. Let's see if we can get a better look closer to the edge. All I'm doing here is using my hands to work my way down. If you have a position like this, you can use this hand and lift your body and use your feet to push you forward. This is a good spot. You can see my feet just hanging over the ledge here. There's a squirrel right there. It's just moving in the leaves. There's probably a whole family of them making noise in the area right now. disturb them too much. I'm going to stand up because it's more comfortable for me to do that. Although I may just remain seated, we'll see. One thing that I thought would be interesting to talk about today, as the dog barks right on schedule in the background to annoy me. One thing of interest to talk about today would be what the goal of philosophy is. People say that the goal of philosophy is to obtain wisdom, to question everything in the hopes that doing so brings you to a more enlightened place. This is a very lofty aim. If I were to give my understanding of what philosophy is, I would give a much more limited idea of what the subject is. In my view, philosophy serves to catalog all of the most important ideas of humanity, all the different schools of thought, and their implications and consequences. On society and humankind at large. Now, the reason I believe philosophy should have a limited scope in only categorizing ideas is because to give a prescriptive claim about how something should be, which goes steps beyond making only descriptive claims, one must acknowledge that in order to make prescriptive claims requires every individual to have the same set of axioms. That is, guiding principles on which they base their overarching ideas and beliefs. The reason that the enterprise of human thought is so vast, and by extension philosophy is so vast, is because everyone's axioms are different. questions like, what is the scope of philosophy? Or what is philosophy good for? Falls under the purview of metaphilosophy. And I believe metaphilosophy is probably the most interesting branch of philosophy, to me at least. If we can acknowledge the limits to a subject, in my view, that is a giant step forward in truly understanding that subject. I've heard this one description of what a definition is, and I believe it to be true. This definition goes something like this. To define a word is to say what it is not. I believe it is very important in all things to set limitations and to understand what things are not. There's a squirrel right next to me. That's really cool. It was not afraid of me in any way. I hope that shows up on the camera. One interesting thing to contemplate is the idea that not all things have a definitive answer. As the squirrel runs downhill again. If we can understand that not all things have a definitive answer, we can understand more fully the limitations of philosophy. Philosophy, at least in my view, has a job of broadly explaining varying ideas. That is different than having what you would term answers to those ideas. To me, just because someone can contemplate an idea doesn't mean that that idea is worthy of being a, quote, answer to a question. In my understanding, a major limitation of philosophy is its inability to adequately discard ideas as one would discard a scientific principle that has shown to be obsolete. This is, in large part, the reason that philosophy is not in the business of making societal progress. Serves as a historical storage of humanity's ideas, so people can look back and see the breadth of human ideals throughout the civilizations. This in itself is a worthy goal. You do not need more than this to be a benefit to society. You do not need to have answers that are better than others, because ultimately I believe to go down that road is very relative and almost impossible to prove one way or another, and even harder to get vast numbers of people to believe that their ideas are wrong. It is possible that in just cataloging the ideas of humanity, we can get a better understanding of what life is all about. If we see that the same ideas have been wondered about for hundreds or thousands of years, then we can most certainly get a greater appreciation for that idea. And really, in my view, obtaining a greater appreciation for things, for how things work, or ideas in general, is really the point of life. If you can get to a point in life where you understand the complexity of life, in my view, you have lived a full life. There may be an ultimate truth to the big questions in life, but as far as I can tell, we are a long way away from entertaining that possibility. I would venture to say that that idea will never come to pass. This is a nice, cloud pattern right now. It doesn't last that long, but it is a nice cloud pattern. I'm going to turn around now and stand up. This is an interesting situation. I need to essentially spin my legs back over this rock, and I don't have much support to do it. So essentially, I just need to lean back not get punctured by a stick, and move my body. So, of the time where you try to move your body and it doesn't work out. So what I have to do is find a different way to spin my body. Now, this is why it's always good to have a handhold, because I can use this anchor point to turn on my side in the opposite direction I was going to go before. If you look at my feet here, you can see the slope. I got very close to the edge, but hopefully it made for an interesting video. Now you can see I'm putting a lot of force through this hand. It's the only thing keeping me up. I have to move this hand up though to get better position. So I have to put weight on my elbows, on my camera hand, and hope I don't slide back. I slide back a little bit, but it's okay. As you can see, this is where we are. And this is what it looks like. Okay. Using that tree as an anchor point, I can pull myself up to a better position. And this standing up now shows you that smaller trees are stronger than you think they are. That tree took a lot of force that I was imparting on it to keep myself from sliding, and it's still standing. Sometimes nature is very helpful, and other times nature will kill you quickly. much better spot. You can see where I just was and where I moved to. There's now disturbed soil on that path. Earlier, I was talking about axioms and how everybody has different definitions for things and how they use those definitions and axioms to arrive at beliefs and ideals. One thing I would like to state, just for clarification and greater understanding, is how I define the word evil. In my opinion, evil is defined as taking advantage of other people's shortcomings for your own benefits. In my view, this is happening a lot in American society. A lot of people are in the habit of isolating and taking advantage of people's shortcomings so that they can get ahead in life. This is predatory, and it is sad as the squirrel makes noise and the mosquitoes bite. It is sad, but modern American society is very predatory. Now that I have defined what evil is, let me define what I think good is. Goodness is making attempts to elevate others without intentionally hurting others in the process. In my view, intentions or intentionality plays a giant role in whether something should be strived for or not. If you can achieve something without hurting other people, as they almost fell there, and you could tell by my voice change. If you can achieve something without hurting other people, you are on the path to goodness. One of the problems with libertarianism is the idea that libertarian practitioners hold the belief that they should be able to do whatever it is they want to do as long as their actions don't harm other people. And this may sound good in an elementary sense, but it is very hard to find an activity where other people, maybe down the line from you, aren't harmed. That's why the pursuit of goodness is so difficult in my view. It is so hard not to harm other people through your actions. Even if you have no intention of doing so, there always seems to be someone that is harmed. If you can do things like define what you think good and evil should be, you are well on your way to understanding the world, at least in a way that makes sense to you. And in my view, that is really all that philosophy and life is about. Philosophy is about finding a way as an individual to make better sense of your world. Not even sure that philosophy's role is to help people in creating axioms. I think that really comes down to people's cognitive abilities. But I do think philosophy has a role in helping people expand upon their axioms and understand the greater implications of those axioms. As the sky turns into a shade of pink. It's amazing to me how the mosquitoes are so responsive to warm weather. Today is a warm weather day and the mosquitoes are out in full force. But if the temperature drops 30 degrees by tomorrow or the next day, the mosquitoes will not be around. But it's worth getting bitten by mosquitoes to finish my idea. And to take some nice shots of the woodland. There must be a bird nearby because it is loud and it's making rhythmic noise, unless that's an insect. I cannot tell. It's pretty cool to me how the light stays longer on warmer days. That's interesting to me. I believe science is very interesting, but the major problem with science is that the barrier to entry is very high, and not even the barrier to initial entry. It's almost like the barrier to stay educated on a subject is extremely high. If you don't stay up to date on a topic, then within 5 years, it's almost like all the knowledge you gain is out of date and you're essentially not useful. The nice thing about philosophy, psychology, and sociology is also, you could argue, its drawback in that those subjects don't operate necessarily on a time clock. And if they do operate in some sense temporally, that time clock doesn't move as fast as things like science progress. So in a sense, it's easier to understand things like sociology, psychology, and philosophy. Although I would argue that those things don't move society forward as much as science and technological pursuits do. These mosquitoes are crazy today. 6:10 now. So it should be getting dark within the next 10 minutes. That's a nice view. It's always interesting to play with the camera angles. It's interesting to me how in the past philosophy and religion were so intertwined, and now they're really not. That's one of the progressions in the field that I can point to. The almost unnecessariness of religion to intellectual pursuits is a great step forward for Western philosophy, at least, in the Western world. One thing I do think is interesting as the squirrel climbs over all the objects is the idea of what human biology will look like in the future and what technologies we will employ to aid in people's lives. Some people speculate on the future for a living. Futurists. I watch the YouTube channel Michael Godier often. He's a very interesting person, and he has some interesting ideas. But ultimately, I think a lot of the ideas that futurists have are very lofty. For example, the idea that we might upload the consciousness of a deceased person onto a computer drive, so in a sense those people never die, is quite crazy to me when you think of how easily it is to corrupt a piece of software. If you have even the tiniest corruption in software, then all your data can be wiped away. If we take, for example, my use of this camera, I can no longer keep track of all the times I've made a video just to have that video file be corrupted because it didn't save properly when I went to end the video. I would argue that taking a limited approach to the way you see the world leaves you with the cleanest picture of what reality is. You can speculate within reason, but keep in mind that when you do that, your claims should be given less weight than you probably wish was the case. There is room for exploring hypothetical situations. But I believe that in situations where that is done, in philosophy and science, we should acknowledge the limitations of such an approach. Especially if we try to make prescriptive claims based on those speculative, hypothetical situations that we are playing around with. Hypotheticals, much like philosophy, have the purpose of exploring all that may be possible. But that is all they are good for, is exploring what may be possible and not going any further than that. Exploring what may be possible is in itself a very lofty goal, worthy of thought, consideration, and admiration. And that's going to be the end of the video, because it is finally getting dark. the good weather can only help you so much. As I leave you with the sound of birds and a semi nice looking sky.